Shalom family, it's your man Eliah. Thank you for joining me at Unsectarian Wisdom, and as usual, I'm a wise, wealthy, rich, celestial being that is loved by the Most High Creator. Let's get it, family. Family, we're jumping, as you see in the corner, we're jumping back in the Kolbrin, and right now we're in chapter 4, the deluge. Hold on, let me get it. Okay, there you go. Chapter 4, the deluge. That's what we're reading today. Alright. Here we go. It is written in the great book of the Firehawks that earth was destroyed twice, once altogether by fire, and once partially by water. The destruction by water was the lesser destruction, and came about in this manner. The people of those times spurned all spiritual things, and men lived only for pleasure, caring little for the good of mankind or the future of the people. Lewdness and lies were upon the tongues of all men, and brother could not deal justly with brother. The princes and governors were corrupt, and proper tribute was not paid. The statues were held up to scorn. The lives of men were ruled. The lives of men were ruled by their desires, and they spent their days in gluttony, drunkenness, fornication, dancing, and singing to instruments of music. The land was unattended, for men dissipated. The land was unattended, for men dissipated their strength in unproductive lust and pleasures. Women lacked shame, for many would cast their glances after one man. Women lacked shame, for many would cast their glances after one man. Men fought among themselves, and even slew one another because of their lust for worthless women. While the chaste women were not sought, they were even rejected, for men declined the effort of being worthy of them in the eyes of their fathers. This sounds a lot like today, family. Wives were unhonored, and only the women of pleasure commanded the attentions of men. Women were unclean and immodest, and men lay with them shamelessly in the presence of one another. Old women were more lustful than the young ones, while virgins were seduced and corrupted in their childhood. Fathers fornicated before their sons, and were admired for their prowess. They made no distinction between their sons and other men, or between their wives and other women. Deceit and violence were seen on every hand. I knew I wasn't correct. Man, family, this don't describe today. Look, once again, I read these as you read them. I'm reading it for the first time, and this is like almost like revelations from the Bible to me. This is like, what? This sounds just like today. Man, okay. The east and the north were high mountains, upon which a tribe called the son of Nizarah, the men of the mountains. The east and north were high mountains, upon which a tribe called the sons of Nizarah, the men of the mountains, who were hunters, skillful in the chase and valiant in battle. The men were upright, their wives were faithful, and their sons noble. In their hearts were no unworthy thoughts. Man, family, if you, once again, I've said this in other videos, there's this symbolism. It seems a lot of people that tend to be, very righteous tend to live in the mountains or far off places that are away from the general public, and there's not many of them. To the east and north were high mountains, upon which a tribe called the sons of Nizarah, and I see that Nez almost like Nazareth, maybe, even though it's different, but still similarity. The men of the mountains, who were hunters, skillful in the chase and valiant in battle. The men were upright, their wives were faithful, and their sons noble. In their hearts were no unworthy thoughts, no envy or hate, no malice or deceitfulness. They did not smile before a man's face, uttering smooth words. Then when he turned his back, reach out to stab him. In their wives and daughters there was no impure longing, and neither cursing nor lying was heard among them. The women folk respected their men, and maintained decency and decorum. Yet they were men with men's ways, abhorring all forms of unmanliness and degeneracy. Therefore, the treasures in the cities of the plains and the weakness of the people to whom these belong did not go unnoticed by the sons of Nizra. So they said among themselves, let us go down and do a good deed among these people. Let us show them the ways of men who are strong, making them slaves and possessing ourselves of their goods. This talk continued among the men in the marketplaces and gatherings until they were stirred up to deeds. And they gathered together a war band of fighting men. The mountain men chose leaders from among themselves, after their custom, and prepared to fall upon the soft living people of the plains and become their masters. Man, when the chiefs of the mountain men saw what was happening, they became wroth and ordered their men to return to their flocks and pastures. The chief of chiefs stood up before the gathered warband and said, it is our decree that this thing shall not be done. You must not go down from these mountains, bringing the sword to these people. Leave them alone, as rotted fruit is left on the tree to wither and die. Leave them to follow their own ways a little longer, and in the fullness of time they will destroy themselves. Make no widows among your own people. If you go down there carrying fire and sword, you may find a trap laid for you among the flesh pots. The attraction of their pleasure and the temptations of their luxury is too strong. The attraction of their pleasure and the temptations of their luxury is too strong. Men such as you is too. It's just, I'm sorry, fam. The sentence messed up the way that the grammar, the symbol, the attraction of their pleasure and the temptation of their luxury is too strong. Men such as you, like the lure, the flame has from such as you, like the lure, the flame has for the moth. Do not lay yourselves open to destruction, even though the manner of its accomplishment be pleasant. If you must destroy this people, then destroy utterly, so nothing remains. They are many, while we are few. And though by the keen, hard-hitting sword we may prevail in battle, yet might we not be lost under a deluge of soft feathers. Will you be wise enough to sup on milk and honey without being drowned in it? For a time the fighting men heeded the words of their chiefs, for they were neither willful nor reckless. But there were some among them who went down to the plains in peace. They returned with tales of treasures and pleasures awaiting below, reporting that the time was ripe for an attack. The warmen hired by the lowlanders having departed, for in those days the gods of Sherapik strove against the gods of Ilshdur and Ledek. Then the fighting men disregarded the commands of their chiefs, and choosing war captains from among themselves, went down and fell upon the people of the plain. The people of the plain bowed before the strength of the men of the mountains. They did not fight, for among all their possessions they regarded their lives as the most valuable thing, precious above all else. They said, take valuable things, precious, They said, take whatever we have, our riches and harvest, the treasured things from our dwellings, even our daughters for your amusement, but leave us enough that we may live under your shadow. The sturdy men of the mountains were sickened by these half men who had lived for 3 generations without fighting, and they despised them. The battle-hardened men who had come down from the highlands took whatsoever they desired. The plainsmen demurred, but because their stomachs turned to water before the virility of their conquerors, their prostrations were wards of wind. The victors clothed themselves in plundered finery, and indulged themselves in the wines and delicacies of the food tables. They slept in beds of luxury and dispensation, every want being attended to by the vanquished. They learned the ways of sensuality, which goes with soft living, and when seated with natural pleasure, some lightened their boredom with unnatural ones. The mountain men saw that the women of the cities were beautiful, but they were not modest, casting their charms before the masters. Unashamed, so it followed, they were taken when required and treated as chattels. The women did not complain, though hitherto they had stood equal with their menfolk, but women's equality with half men is not something of value. With women like this, the men placed no restraint on their lust, and went from excess to excess. The women, rejoicing in the strength and vigor of the men, said among themselves, "Here are men indeed such as we have not known before." Then, in the manner of women, they turned away from their own men and from the households of their husbands and fathers, for now they despised them. They threw off all womanly restraint, and grappled with the victors like ravening beasts, and the strong were vanquished by weakness. Always do women behave thus when their menfolk are defeated in battle. It is for this men fight. None came to do battle with the victors, for they who had fought for the gods had destroyed themselves. In the fullness of time, the victors too were destroyed by the flesh pots, by fornication and drunkenness, by ease and luxury. Their fighting strength and valor departed with the passing years. They grew fat and slothful. They who had come down in manly array to fight and win, who could not be challenged in battle by the lesser men of the plains, were eaten up in the mansions of pleasure, in the drinking booths with music, wine, and fine linen. Upon the mountain and in the mountain homes there was weeping and sadness among the women. Fields were untilled and cattle strayed away. Sheep went unplucked. The best craftsmen were gone, and few remained willing to learn their skill. The teachers of learning taught no more. The gnarled hand that had wielded the sword and terrorized the foe now plucked the strings of psaltery and lyre. The rough jerkins and corselets were cast off, and now garments were of fine linen, dyed purple and crimson. Men arrayed their softening bodies in gaudy attire, and bathed in scented waters. They rejected their own women for those of the cities, whose hands and feet were stained with bright colors, and whose faces were marked with blue. One day, from afar, off came 3 men of Ardis, their country having been stricken by a mountain burst. They were worshippers of the one God, whose light shines within men. And when they had lived in the 2 cities for a number of days, they were stirred up in their hearts because of the things they saw. They called upon their God to see these evil things. Their God sent down a curse upon the men of the cities, and there came a strange light and a smoky mist which caught at the throats of men. All things became still and apprehensive. There were strange clouds in the skies, and the nights were hung with heaviness. Many days passed before a north wind came, and the skies cleared. But then, when women conceived, they bore devils, monstrosites came forth from their wombs, whose faces were terrible, and whose limbs were unproportioned. In those days men knew the art of working clay, and making linen in bright colors, and also the use of eye paint. They had knowledge of herbs and magic, of enchantment, and the wisdom of the book of heaven, the knowledge of signs and omens, the secrets of the seasons, of the moon and the coming of the waters. The remnants of the sons of Nazir remained upon the mountains which are against Ardis, by the land about the encampment of Lamach. In Ardis there were wise men filled with the inner wisdom, who read the book of heaven with understanding and knew the signs. They saw that the deeds of men in all the lands about the mountains had brought them to their hour. Then the day came when the lady of the night changed her garment for one of a different hue, and her form swept more swiftly across the skies. Her tresses streamed out behind in gold and copper, and she rode in a chariot of fire. The people in those days were a great multitude, and a loud cry ascended into heaven. Then the wise men went to Sherpik, now called Serpesh, and said to Sesuda the king, "Behold, the years are shortened, and the hour of trial draws nigh. The shadow of doom approaches this land because of its wickedness. Yet Because you have not mingled with the wicked, you are set apart and shall not perish. This is your seed. This so your seeds may be preserved. Then the king sent for Hanok, son of Hagatur, and he came out of Ardis. Hold on, I gotta go back and read something real quick, family. The remnants of the sons of Nazir remained upon the mountains, which are the remnants of the sons of Nazir remained upon the mountains, which are against Ardis, by the land about the encampment of Lamach. In Ardis there were wise men. Okay, I had to go back and read something. The king sent for Hanok, son of Hugartur, and he came out of Ardis. For there he had heard a voice among the reeds saying, abandon your abode and possessions, for the hour of doom is at hand. Neither gold nor treasure can buy a reprieve. Then Hanok came into the cities and said to the governors, behold, I would go down to the sea, and would therefore build a great ship, that I may take my people upon it. With me will go those who trouble you, and they will take the things which cause you concern. Therefore you will be left in peace to your own enjoyment. The governor said, go down to the sea, and build your ship there, and it will be well, for you go with our blessing. But Hanok answered, it has been told to me in a dream, that the ship should be built against the mountains, and the sea will come up to me. When he had gone away, they declared him mad. The people mocked him, calling him commander of the sea. But they did not hinder him, seeing gain in his undertaking. Therefore a great ship was laid down under the leadership of Hanok, son of Hagartur, for Sesuda, king of Serapesh, from whose treasury came payment for the building of the vessel. It was built on the lake of Namos, close by the river of gold. Hold on, forgive me, family. It was built on the lake of Namos, It was built on the lake of Namos, close by the river of gold, where it divides all the household of Hanok. Okay, hold on. It was built on the lake of Namos, close by the river of gold, where it divides. All the household of Hanok was there, and the household of his brother was directed. And the household of his brother, who directed the men at the task. Dwavin, captain of ships, from the land beyond Ardis, was overseer of the craftsmanship of the craftsmen. Hold on, let me read that again because I read that horribly. It was built on the lake of Namos, close by the river of gold, where it divides. All the household of Hanok was there, and the household of his brother, who directed the men at the task. Dwavin, captain of ships, from the land beyond Ardis, was overseer of the craftsmen. The women and children carried, and the men built. The length of the great ship was 300 cubits, and its breadth was 50 cubits, and it was finished off above by 1 cubit. It had 3 stories, which were built without a break. The lowermost was for the beasts and cattle, and their provender, and it was laid over with sand from the river. Hold on. The lowermost was for the beasts and cattle, and their provender, and it was laid over with sand from the river. The middle was for birds and fowls, for plants of every kind, that are good for man and beast. And the uppermost was for the people. Each story was divided in twain, so that there were 6 floors below and 1 above. And they were divided across with 7 partitions. In it were cisterns for water and storehouses for food. And it was built with ascara wood, which water cannot rot or worms enter. It was pitched within and without, and the cisterns were lined. The planks were edged, and the joints made fast with hair and oil. Great stones were hung from ropes of plaited leather, and the ship was without mast or oars. There were no poles and no openings, except for a hatch beneath the eaves above whereby all things entered. The hatch was secured by great beams. Into the great ship they carried the seed of all living things. Grain was laid up in baskets and many cattle, and sheep were slain for meat, which was smoked by fire. They also took all kinds of beasts of the field and wild beasts, birds and fowls, all things that crawl, also gold and silver, metals and stones. The people of the plains came up and camped about to see this wonder. Even the sons of Nazirah were among them, and they daily mocked the builders of the great ship, But these were not dismayed, and toiled harder at the task. They said to the mockers, "Have your hour, for ours will surely come." On the appointed day, they who were to go with the great ship departed from their homes and the encampment. They kissed the stones and embraced the trees, and they gathered up handfuls of earth. For all this they would see no more. They loaded the great ship with their possessions, and all their provender went with them. They set a ram's head over the hatch, pouring out blood, milk, honey, and beer, beating upon their beast. They loaded the great ship with their possessions, and all their provender went with them, their children. They set a ram's head over the hatch, pouring out blood, milk, honey, and beer, beating upon their beast, weeping and lamenting. The people entered the great ship and closed the hatch, making it secure within. The king had entered, and with him those of his blood. In all 14. The king had entered, and with him those of his blood. In all 14. For it is forbidden that his household go into the ship. The king had entered, and with him those of his blood. In all 14. For it was forbidden that his household go into the ship. Of all the people who entered with him, 2 understood the ways of the sun and moon, and the ways of the year and the seasons. 1 the quarrying of stones, 1 the making of bricks, and 1 the making of axes and weapons, 1 the playing of musical instruments, 1 bread, 1 the making of pottery, 1 the care of gardens, and 1 the carving of wood and stone, 1 the making of roofs, 1 the working of timbers, 1 the making of cheese and butter, 1 the growing of trees and plants, 1 the making of plows, 1 the weaving of cloth and making of dyes, and 1 the brewing of beer, 1 the felling and cutting of trees, 1 the making of chariots, 1 dancing, 1 the mysteries of the scribe, 1 the building of houses and the working of leather. There was 1 skilled in the working of cedar and willow wood, and he was a hunter, 1 who knew the cunning of games and circus, and he was a watchman. There was an inspector of water and walls, a magistrate and a captain of men. There were 3 servants of God. There was Hanok and his brother and their households, and Dwavin and 6 men who were strangers. Then with the dawning, men saw an awesome sight. There, riding on a great black rolling cloud, came the destroyer, newly released from the confines of the sky vaults. And she raged about the heavens, for it was her day of judgment. The beast with her opened its mouth and belched forth fire and hot stones and a vile smoke. It covered the whole sky above, and meeting place of earth and heaven could no longer be seen. It covered the whole sky above, and meeting place of earth and heaven could no longer be seen. In the evening the places of the stars were changed. They rolled across the sky to new stations. Then the floodwaters came. The floodgates of heaven were opened, and the foundations of earth were broken apart. The surrounding waters poured over the land and broke upon the mountains. The storehouses of wind burst their bolts asunder. So storms and whirlwinds were loose to hurl themselves upon the earth. In the seething waters and howling gales, all buildings were destroyed, trees were uprooted, and mountains cast down. There was a time of great heat, then came a time of bitter cold. The waves over the waters did not rise. The waves over the waters did not rise and fall, but seethed and swirled. There was an awful sound above. The pillars of heaven were broken and fell down to earth. The sky vault was rent and broken. The whole of creation was in chaos. The stars in the heavens were loosened from their places, so they dashed about in confusion. There was a revolt on high. A new ruler appeared there and swept across the sky in majesty. Those who had not labored at the building of the great ship and those who had mocked the builders came as quickly to the place where it was lying. They climbed upon the ship and beat upon it with their hands. They raged and pleaded, but could not enter inside, nor could they break the wood. As the great ship was borne up by the waters, it rolled, and they were swept off, for there was no foothold for them. The ship was lifted by the mighty surge of waters, and hurled among the debris, but it was not dashed upon the mountainside because of the place where it was built. All the people not saved within the ship were swallowed up in the midst of raging confusion, and their wickedness and corruption was purged away from the face of the earth. The swelling waters swept up to the mountaintops and filled the valleys. They did not rise like water poured into a bowl, but came in great surging torrents. But when the tumult quieted, and the waters became still, they stood no more than 3 cubits above the earth. The destroyer passed away into the fastness of heaven, and the great flood remained 7 days, diminishing day by day, as the waters drained away to their places. Then the waters spread out calmly, and the great ship drifted amid a brown scum and debris of all kinds. After many days, the great ship came to rest upon Cardo in the mountains of Ashtar against Nishim in the land of God. All right, family, I'm going to end it right there. That was chapter 4. Next will be chapter 5, the birth of Hermeneter. I guess. We'll figure it out. All right, family, thank you for joining me. As usual, I'm your man, Elijah, and I'm a wise, wealthy, rich, celestial being that is loved by the Most High Creator. We got it, family. I'll catch you later. Be blessed.